Hello, everyone, and welcome to Connecticut at your service. My name is Carmen Nieves, and I am your host. This show is all about spotlighting the individuals, the businesses, and the nonprofits that serve our community, our great state of Connecticut. And today I am so excited to introduce to you our guest here today, Ms. Cynthia Jennings, who is a civil rights attorney. I would love to start the conversation just by telling me a little bit about yourself, kind of what helps you to lead, and what's next for you.
Okay, well, actually, I'll start with me being somebody who's concerned about the environment. And I've spent a lot of time in the environment. I live near a very noxious landfill that people were getting sick around. And in fact, the landfill, every man on the street, every black man on the street next to the landfill had died but two, and those from cancer, and those two had cancer. So there was a friend of mine named Helen Nixon. She started an organization called Survivors on Sunset Street. And we worked to shut the landfill down. We worked to make sure that people in the community were aware of what was going on. We worked to cut back and clean up that landfill. And we really worked to make sure that people were not dying in cancer clusters like they had died before.
Wow, that's amazing that you're doing that. So were you an attorney before or after that work?
Oh, I was an attorney because of that work. because of that work, I could not find an attorney that would take the case and help me fight the city or fight the landfill, the owner of the landfill, and get that landfill cleaned up. So eventually I went to law school and I became an environmental attorney.
Well, that's amazing. And I know that I've listened to some of the other interviews that you were on. I've read some pieces on you. And I think what really impressed me about you was that you're such a champion for voter rights. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that. I saw an interview that you were like, we need to get young people to register to vote and to get out the vote and to get them before they get out of school.
Yes.
So I think that please share a little bit about that.
Okay, so my belief is that young people need to be trained how to vote, who to vote for, how to register, what voting means, why you vote. And they should even have elections in schools so that they know what it takes to write a campaign platform, what it takes to win an election, how to talk to voters. So, they need to be trained because when they get out of high school, they turn 18, they're expected to vote. And how are they going to know who to vote for and how to select the people that represent us? And since we live in a representative form of government where we don't all vote on everything, the people that we elect vote and speak for us. So it's important to know how to select a candidate and how to support a candidate, how to work in a political campaign. Those are all some of the things that I was trained to do because I worked with people who were involved in politics.
So and thank you for that. I agree that definitely young people, we need to train them, help them, coach them, and get them because the best way for them to be leaders is to learn how to use their voice. And I want to celebrate you for the work that you were published in an article talking about rights for individuals who are returning citizens.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you're championing that effort and what people can do. We are going to have the phone number to the Secretary of State's office on the monitor, so if people want information later, to talk about if people have questions about are they eligible to vote, how do they vote, where would they go to vote in their town. But please share with us a little bit about your work around helping reentry.
All right. Well, first of all, in Jamaica, people vote, they can vote from prison. In Connecticut, you can't vote unless you are out of prison and unless you are off probation. If you're on, you can be on probation, but you have to, if you're on parole, you cannot vote. If you're on probation and you're out of prison, you can vote. And many people that are in jails are not in jails for felonies. They're there for misdemeanors, child support, other issues, and they have not lost their voting rights, but there's no way they can vote from jail. So there should be some kind of voter registration and making sure that people that are incarcerated are allowed to cast their vote as well. Especially if they have not committed a felony, then they should be able to cast their vote when they're incarcerated and when they get out.
When individuals are returning back to their communities after being incarcerated, and there's organizations championing a lot of this work. There's Women Against Mass Incarceration, helping women get services when they return home. Career Resources just opened the Welcoming Center, which is helping individuals. Are you familiar
Yes.
with that program? Ernie Newton is leading that effort for individuals, and voting rights is right there with the services that they need, along with housing, employment, and other services. So in all the championing that you're doing, tell me what's next for you, Ms. Jennings.
Well, I will always be a champion for injustices. And irrespective of what the injustice is, I will fight against it, because so many people they don't even know what their rights are and where they're supposed to go if they want to register. If they've been charged with a crime, they don't know who to talk to. I mean, so I'm an attorney, and I don't do criminal law, but I do civil law and civil rights. And I address many issues that have to do with people that are in the workforce, that are being forced out of the workforce, their jobs being taken away because they don't know what their rights are, and they have no one to champion their issues. So those are some of the things that I do now. With the environment, I'm still fighting to make sure that 5G and the new platforms that come through are safe, and they're not putting an undue amount of radiation into our homes and into our communities, and that we know where the cell towers are located, and that those cell towers are monitored. So I'm fighting for that, to make sure that our health issues are not exacerbated because they don't have any accountability. So one of the things that I'll always do is environmental justice, to make sure that people who are living next to landfills are not unjustly, are taken into consideration before they site a landfill, before they start an incinerator. Because if you look at what happened with COVID, so many people, an excessive amount of particularly African Americans and Latinos, and people who live near landfills and incinerators, had a much higher death rate than other people because their lungs started out already compromised from incineration. And we don't think about that until it's too late. So,
and it complicates other issues like asthma and emphysema and all of those different types of things. So I agree with you that the fight just never stops, right? So I know that you're a champion for many things, child welfare, because a little birdie told me that you were a foster parent and that you've taken individuals in. So I can definitely see the pattern of being a champion in our community and fighting for justices. And one of those that I heard you talk about previously that I would love for you to share again is resources for businesses in Connecticut.
Absolutely. Businesses, first of all, I used to work with a community college, and we dealt with the fact that women were in business, but they were never trained. They didn't know how to price their product. They didn't know how to ship their products. They didn't know how to get resources to assist them to keep them in business. We had to, literally sit down and come up with a program that actually trained people from the beginning to the end about how they would get their product to the market, and how they would collect the money, and how much taxes they would have to pay on it. I mean, there's a lot of things people don't know about. Taxes that's one of the things people don't consider when they price their products.
And then, a lot of small businesses are so busy working their business that they don't work their business, right? Minding your P's and Q's, talking about your taxes, and with you mentioned COVID, and with the CARES Act, and some of the other resources that they had made available to small businesses, I can tell you about businesses that were not able to access that just because they didn't have a bank account, or they didn't have like a street address, or they couldn't prove what they purchased for their business versus their individual. So on this show, Connecticut at Your Service, not only are we here with Ms. Cynthia Jennings, but we're also going to be having other guests that are going to be talking about the services that they provide to our city. So I want to just continue the conversation about making sure that people get out the vote. The big election's coming up on the 8th, so we're not telling people how to vote. We're
Right.
just making sure that people understand the importance of using their voice. So we've talked a little bit about having youth be voters and the things that we can do for that. We talked a little bit about reentry. We'll put the phone number back up for the Secretary of State's office if people have questions about where they can vote in their town, how they can vote. One of the things I would love for you to talk about that you shared before was about how people don't even have to go into the office now, that they can register right online. Talk to a little bit about that, 'cause
Right.
that's exciting to me.
I think it's important that people know that they can register, sit in front of their computer and register to vote. And 2 days after they put their registration in, a card comes in the mail that tells them where they go to vote, how they, who they, what candidates are running. I mean, what party they're a part of. I mean, the information that they get from actually filling out that form right on computer is amazing. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do. I want to start a program in the schools where young people actually go out with their computers and register people to vote. The only thing you need is their date of birth. You have to get that from them, and their license, their driver's license, or the last 4 digits of their social security
ID.
card. And so or an ID. So you have to, but young people need to know how to register people to vote. Young people need to go out there and do the registration because they're savvy on their computers. And the other thing is that young people need to be, not only serve internships, maybe with the Secretary of State's office, maybe with with other departments, but every single young person should have an internship in a government agency so that they learn what that agency does. They should be oriented. They're not there to get coffee and make copies. They're there to learn a skill that they can use and that they will be using in the next 10 years. So the other thing with young people is that we only have them until they're 17 and a half or 18. And so by the time they turn that age, they should be registered to vote in the schools. There should be a full voter registration drive to make sure all the young people that are in there about to graduate are registered before they graduate.
And you mentioned about the DMV too, that you can also register at the DMV, is that correct?
Every time you go to interact with the Department of Motor Vehicles, you end up they'll ask you, are you a registered voter? And if not, they have the form there. They'll let you fill out the application, and you will get something in the mail, just like you do from the Secretary of State's office as well, that will tell you where you go to vote, and when the next election is, and what party you registered as. So it's very important that everyone register to vote. But then again, down the road, we could have mandatory voter registration, just like we have you get your Social Security number at birth now. They never did that before. And so there's a way that people can be registered automatically, and then they don't have to keep re-registering. You should only have to register one time in your life. Our system is is working such that so many people are purged or removed from the lists during and before an election, or during an election, or right after an election, that every time there's a major election, we have to have a major voter registration drive to re-register people. People should be registered for life one time, and that's it.
How do you solve the problem that people move around, right? They move around, or they had that address and now they're not there, or something's happened where they've physically gotten removed. So what might be a solution around that?
Well, first of all, when they go to the polls to vote, every single polling place should register you to vote at that polling place. So if you've changed your address and you go to the wrong polling place, you should still be able to register there, and they'll tell you where to vote. Or they should even be allowed to take your vote there for that one time.
So are they able to do that right there at the voting poll, or do they need to go somewhere else if something's mismatched?
Well, now they cannot go and register at every polling place. Now, generally, if you go to vote, and they say, well, you're not on the list, you have to go downtown and register and then come back. And if you're on the bus, you're not going to go downtown and register and come back. They've done studies. Right. They've done studies that people just don't do that. So you lose voters that way. And our job should be to make sure that everyone who's eligible to vote can vote. Homeless people should have mailboxes accessible to them where they can get their mail, where they don't have to, even if they don't have an address, they should have a post office box. There's all kinds of things the government can do to make it easier to vote, and it should be easier for people to vote, not more difficult.
And I guess the message with that being said is that a couple of things. So make sure that you understand that your voice counts, and your voice counts because sometimes we put stickers that said I vote, that means I use my voice, right?
Right.
So we want to make sure that they're doing that, that they can contact the Secretary of State's office if they have any question about their voting rights or anything like that, and that it's more important that we do it early. We don't want to find out that there's a problem the day we're going to go vote, right? So it's really important that we're planful for that, that we realize the importance of that, and that we don't give up on that right.
That's right.
And that we're looking, like you were saying, ways to enhance the rights of individuals that would be voting. So on the display is a call-in number because we are a live show, Connecticut at your service, and I'm here today with Cynthia Jennings, who is a civil rights attorney, and she's been talking about voting rights for young people, voting rights for individuals that are returning from being previously incarcerated, doing that, contacting the Secretary of State. So if anyone has any questions, our telephone number is 203-345-0103. We're going to still be chatting with Ms. Cynthia Jennings. And if you have any questions, go on and call in, because I just think that this conversation has been great, talking about voting and things like that. But I think while we wait for a call, I want to know what's next for you. What do you see yourself as the next step?
Okay, well, I think I'm already in my next steps.
Okay, that's important that you're already in
Right.
the journey.
And and as an attorney, I still fight for the environmental rights of people, because environment has to do with our health. And so when you're talking about environmental justice, some cities have so many environmentally risky facilities near where people live that they really need to take a look at what health effects they're causing on those people that live in those neighborhoods and communities. So that's, one of the things that I've done for many years is called environmental justice, and it ended up in Hartford when I was fighting a landfill, and they closed the landfill down. Right now, they did an article 10 years later after the landfill closed, and they had me sitting on top of the landfill, which I never even wanted to ever get on that landfill. But they had me on top of the landfill, and they had 450 solar panels up on the landfill. They had a bird sanctuary on the landfill. We had all kinds of exotic birds and things that are actually coming into our communities. So there's so many other things that we can use our communities for. One of the things when we have these landfills, they off-gas something called methane gas, which is what they use. It's natural gas. And so what we did with our landfill was we had them put landfill gas landfill gas pipes that would actually collect the gas, and actually we heat the city buildings with it. So it saved us money. But we have to recognize that a lot of these facilities are very harmful. We have jet engines in Hartford that fire up when there's not enough money to, there's not enough gas and there's not enough garbage to keep the grid going, the electrical grid. So they'll fire up the gas engines, which totally pollute the community. And we have to recognize that some of these things, we have to know what's going to be dangerous for our communities and make sure that our young people and our seniors in particular, the vulnerable groups in our communities, are protected from the environmental risks that they're facing now.
I like that you said that we need to make sure that we're protecting. So the everyday individual like me doesn't know about pipes and solar. What's the best way for individuals to get involved and get information in their local town? Because you talk about Hartford and we're here in Stratford, so
right. Well, in Stratford, as you're driving through your community, see if you have any facilities that burn garbage. Okay, and if you do, check around and see what neighborhoods they're located in. I know in New Haven they had a lot of environmentally risky facilities, and make sure that you work with the Environmental Protection Agency and make sure that the school air is safe. The schools had a lot of issues in terms of pollution and just all kinds of things that were dangerous for our children. In fact, there have been schools shut down all over the state that have things like PCBs and things that are harmful to your health. Also, pay attention to the news and find out what's going on with that. I know that throughout Connecticut, we've had problems with something called PFAS, which is a permanent form of cancer causing agent that gets into the water, and then every time you drink water, you're drinking a cancer causing agent.
Okay, so we've got a call, so we're going to answer that. Hello and welcome to Connecticut at your service. Oh, I think I might have hung that up, so I hope that they call back. All the excitement. So sorry about that. So we were talking about how can people, so they can go and visit, they can ask questions. How can they get involved with it? Do they go contact their representatives if they have a question? And then what does that Office of Environmental do?
Okay, so if you believe that you have an environmental problem in your city, then you can call your elected official, your elected legislator, or you can go to your alderman or your council person and tell them that you believe that this situation is creating a problem, an environmental problem. If you smell something that just doesn't smell right, I mean, even with the landfills, if they don't smell right, you're not supposed to smell anything that comes from an environmental facility. So if you do smell something, you can always report it to the engineer for the day at DEEP.
Wonderful. Okay. Hello and welcome to Connecticut at your service. You are here with Carmen and with Cynthia. What's your question?
Hello. My question is, I heard you guys talking about voting and information. So my question is, how do you reach the hard-to-reach people, such as people that don't have access to computers,
Great question.
or don't have vehicles to drive around and get to voting polls or things like that? So how do you get that information into each and every home?
Okay, thank you so much to the caller. One of the things that you want to do is you want to make sure that during every election, the political parties always have transportation to the polls. And so you can always do that. The question is whether or not you're registered or not, whether or not you have the proper ID to get registered. And you can also work with, you definitely need to work with the Secretary of State's office and find out, you can look at the voters list and see who's registered and who's not. And if they're not, you can go to their door and knock and say, I would like to register you to vote if you would like to do that. Mm-hmm. So you can always talk to people in your community. You can always look at the voters list that are available downtown at the registrar's offices or at the Secretary of State's office, and you can find out who's registered to vote and who's not. And you can make sure that your voting stays up in your community. The voting has to do with so much money that it's unconscionable for people not to be registered to vote, because the difference between your child's tuition being paid or not being paid could be that you don't have enough support in the community to make sure that this becomes an issue. And you always stay in touch with your elected officials and tell them, I want to know where I go to vote. I want to know how to register to vote. Every one of them should be concerned about that, or else they'll at least point you in the right direction. But you elect people to represent you, and if you didn't elect them, they still represent you, so you still should feel free to go and ask them questions.
And I will tell you, in my experience, most are approachable. Most of them want to help you. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that when we go and we try to reach out for help, whether it's a program, whether it's reaching out to you or reaching out to anyone else, that we take, when we go to someone for help, we kind of have to have the end in mind, right? So this is what I think the solution is, other than just complaining, because some things, the legislator at that level may not be able to be the one that ultimately helps you. But understanding who people are, how to access them, how to reach Cynthia, who can get us into the right place to kind of do that, and whether it's voting, whether it's, services to businesses, whether it's child welfare issue. Question.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. That was great information.
Thank you so much, and have a great day. And listen, we're going to be on every week, so make sure you call back.
Thank you.
Have a great day, and thank you for calling in.
Great. Okay.
So we've talked about so many things. Tell me, what is there anything that we haven't said about Cynthia or voting or business or environmental law that you want to make sure that our viewers know about you?
I just want people to know that one person can change a lot. And it only takes one committed person. When I got involved with the environment, it had to do with seeing a newspaper article and having it said in the newspaper article that they were going to expand the landfill, which already smelled horrible. And when we finished, we had protests. We met with the landfill operator. We met with the reason I got on city council. We met with the city council members, and they said, well, we've already signed a contract that says we cannot support the people, the residents that live here in the event of an environmental lawsuit. So and I couldn't find an attorney because all the attorneys were signed on to the landfill operator. So, I mean, this was a huge conglomerate. They made up to $7 million a day. So they bought everybody. And when the most surprising thing was, I mean, I had one man who called me, and he literally threatened. He said,
oh my goodness,
if you don't leave us alone, we're gonna run you off with a garbage truck and rearrange your face.
Oh my God.
So I said, okay. I said, let me tell you one thing. If you run me off the road with a garbage truck, you better back that truck up. You better make sure I'm dead. You better not let me live. But I was still scared. But I talked so much that they didn't know it. And 10 years after that, or it was about 9 years after that, the same person called me and he said he wanted to meet with myself and a man named Larry Charles, who actually came. And I went to Larry and I said, Larry, they're threatening my life. And he said, well, we're going to have a big landfill forum and we're going to make this a public issue, which he did. And everything that you're scared about, you can make it a public issue. And so when he finally did that, the man called us and asked us to meet him for lunch at some restaurant. And I was like, no, I don't want to meet him. And Larry said, no, let's meet him. And then he said, he took out his checkbook and he gave us a check for $10,000. And I said, I'm not taking that check. And Larry took it. He said, what is this $10,000 for? And the man said, and I used to call him Deep Throat, and because he had a raspy voice when he talked to me. He said,
I was going to say sin.
I know, but he had a raspy voice, and he said that he worked in that landfill for like 20 years. And he said the doctor told him that he had throat cancer and he was terminal and he wasn't going to live much longer. That man has been dead for years, and but he wanted us to continue the work. He wanted us to continue the work. He was the one who threatened to run me off the road. I said, oh,
and
God.
Now that's really the sphere of influence, right? People that we thought were our rivals end up being our allies because now they understand things from a different perspective.
Right, but what it made me understand is that if we don't get this environment under control where we live, that we are going to have a problem with health-wise. And when the pandemic came, we had a very serious problem.
So thank you, Cynthia, for your time, for your advice, for your wisdom, for what's the next move for you. We want to thank everyone for tuning in to Connecticut at Your Service, where we're here to highlight the individuals, the businesses, and the nonprofits that serve our great state. Till next Tuesday, 6:30, make sure you tune in and watch.
Thank you, Carmen.